Okay, so for this computer, I did pick up an Asus Radeon RX Vega 64, one of their Strix models. Now, I actually did an unboxing before of a Vega 56, and now I've gotten the Vega 64. Now, that other Vega 56 I actually picked up from Micro Center here in St. Louis quite a while back, at least several months back. And I got this Vega 64, which is the higher model, cheaper now than the amount that I paid for the lower model 56 a few months ago. The price of graphics cards are starting to recover. They had gone up a while because of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general. It's starting to recover, which I'm happy to report. Now, I will be putting this in as well as the other graphics card that I have. One thing I did want to mention is that I did pay for a Vega 64 this time. Last time I paid for a Vega 56, and the box that I got said Vega 56 on the outside of the box. However, when I connected that thing to my laptop with an eGPU box and I ran LSPCI, it's detected as a Vega 64, that other card that I got. Now, I don't know if that's because of Asus's overclocking, if they actually flashed a 64 BIOS, which would mean that it's like acting as a Vega 64, just with less stable hardware, because it's not just the clock speed that was matching a 64. I looked up several other parameters that you can check to see whether you're running a 56 or a 64, and the one that was plugged into my laptop that I paid for a 56, it definitely was, for all intents and purposes, it was a Vega 64. So I'm actually going to be running two Vega 64s for the price of a 64 and a 56. Now, once again, I'd like to remind you guys, I'm not using these things for playing video games or anything like that. I'm actually using these for rendering Blender scenes. I'm working on an animated series called Displaced, but even after Displaced Season 3 is finally out and done, I still intend to keep working on other animated shows and just other things in general. You know, I do video production on Linux, that's my thing, and I do video production using as much free Libre and open source software as I can. So these are actually tools that I am using to create video productions. I'm not just playing games with them. So if you're wondering why I'm spending all this money, for one thing, I did spend my own personal money on this particular build, not Nerd on the Street money. So like Nerd Club members, your money did not go toward this build. This was all stuff that I earned working this summer. However, if you are wondering, you know, why I'm putting all this money into this stuff, it's not just for fun. It is sort of a professional-ish thing that I'm trying to do. It's creative stuff that I'm trying to do, and I am trying to help the free software movement by making videos with free software. So with that in mind, let's unbox my second Vega this year. Package looks very similar to the first one. We've got our Asus probably documentation, possibly an optical disc, which we won't be able to run since I forgot that optical drive. Yep, we've got installation guide, which, like I said, I got another one of these not too long ago. And just as I predicted, we do have a CD or DVD there. So we will close that right back up since we already know how this thing works. I already know how this thing works, at least. And it works very well. It renders Blender scenes faster than the GTX 1080 in my laptop. Of course, the one I had on the eGPU was not running any displays, so that probably had something to do with it. In the future, I might add more GPUs to this computer. You know, I made sure that there were 4 good PCI Express 3.0 slots so that the bottleneck I was running into with my laptop would never occur with this particular desktop. So in our packaging here, just flip it up so you can see it, we've got the graphics card right there, shining, reflecting off the light. We've got cables down here, and that's basically all there is to it. We do have a nice Velcro tie, so that we can do some cable management later. Set that off to the side. I'm going to have about 1,000 of those by the time I'm done. And this connects 2 power inputs from our power supply to the graphics card, I believe. Because these things do require so much power. And that's one of the other reasons why I wanted to get a good power supply. So here's the card. Just like the other one, these things are huge. The reason I'm not all surprised at how big it is right now is just because I unboxed that other one a few months ago. If I hadn't seen the other one already, I would be exclaiming, wow, this thing is so huge compared to any other graphics card I've ever handled before. And they really are beasts. Like I said, they are great at rendering Blender scenes, way quicker than a lot of other graphics cards out there. Let's get our crinkly anti-static bag out of the way there, and here we go. So this is what the card looks like. It does light up red once you start using it. Once it gets power, it lights up red. These cards are just like that power supply where they actually don't start spinning until they reach, I think it's 55 degrees Celsius or 54. So it's actually kind of neat. I can tell when they're working or when they're not by looking and seeing if the fans are spinning. So yeah, I'm gonna take the plastic off of the rotaries in the middle of the fans. So we're gonna put this thing in this computer first, then I am going to take the eGPU box off of my desk. I'm gonna pause the camera for a few minutes because these cards are so big, it didn't even fit into my eGPU box properly. I did actually have to take the eGPU box apart. I couldn't just take the door off, I had to take the entire thing apart to fit this card in, and then I put the frame back together around the card. So I'm gonna have to undo that process now. But that other card is going to serve me more use in this desktop because I'll be able to leave this thing running 24/7. My laptop, now that I've got a desktop again, I'm going to start taking my laptop to school every single day so that when I'm sitting between classes and things, I can actually take out my laptop and do work instead of just being on my phone browsing Reddit like I've been doing for the last year and a half at this school between classes. So yeah, that will greatly increase my editing productivity, and then this thing will be able to render 24/7 while that's going on. I won't have to stop my renders every time I take my laptop anywhere anymore. I think it really is going to change the way that I am able to work on videos. So here's the card. We will just put it in at this point. Like I said, we'll put this one in first, then I'll grab the other one off camera, and we'll wait until everything's in before I turn the thing on. Because once again, why test as we go when we could just do everything all at once, and then when it doesn't work, we're left wondering what happened. All right, so we're gonna put this in the slot right here, the top slot. I'll probably put the second one like in the third slot or something, just to have, you know, as much airflow as possible. If I ever add a third one, then we're gonna have to start making some tough decisions with regards to airflow, but since each card has 3 gigantic fans in it, I mean, these aren't as big as the power supply fan or anything, but, you know, 3 fans, they should be pretty good with cooling themselves, pushing air out the vent in the back and whatnot. Okay, and we do just have thumb screws here for our PCI slots in the back. They are in there pretty tight, so I am gonna grab a screwdriver and get those started. There we go. And we'll do the first 2 for this first card. One thing I just noticed now is that these 2 M.2 slots on the bottom of the motherboard are going to be underneath the third slot of the graphics card. I'll probably still put my other graphics card in that slot, because the alternative to that would be putting it in the very bottom, and that is going to get in the way of all the headers at the bottom. But if I do ever add another M.2 drive into this computer, I will have to take the second graphics card out. So it's good to know that in advance so that I'm not planning to do a speedy installation and then opening it up and seeing that it's going to take longer, having it be a big surprise. Alright, and just so you guys are aware, these cards do have DVI output, 2 HDMI, and 2 DisplayPort. I will be using the DisplayPort for this one. I should be using 2 DisplayPorts actually, because I've got 2 DisplayPort 4K monitors. One of them that I bought, and the other one that was sent to me for free by BenQ. Highly recommend BenQ for your monitors. They make some great products. There's a reason I chose them for the first one that I did buy. Alright, and we are going to pull this rubber protector off of the card. So now you can see right there that metal bit at the bottom. Don't touch that if you've never done this before, but that's what's going to slide into the computer here. So we'll turn this thing around. Oh, before we put it in, we'll take the plastic off the top of this, since there is plastic on the protector here. Like I said, if you want more in-depth stuff on the graphics card, feel free to go watch my other video on unboxing the other one, since it was basically the exact same, except the box said 56 on it instead of 64. Okay, so this thing peels right off. Now, we've got this beautiful looking metal finish here. Underneath that square is the actual GPU chip itself, and now we'll put this here in the slot. Gonna have to move our motherboard cord out of the way a little bit, and we'll push this thing in. Man, that is a beast. Okay, and it pops in, and there we go. So that's installed. Gonna put the thumb screws back in pretty quickly so that we don't have too much strain on our motherboard here. Breaking out screwdriver number 3 here. Really tough to get into all these nooks and crannies sometimes. Okay. Yeah, so you want to get that screwed in so that this heavy card doesn't pull down on that motherboard slot too much. For the most part, the motherboards are built to handle it, but, you know, the motherboard could never support the entire card by itself. especially not long term. So put in the screw on the top slot here. This is where we really get into the territory of if something is dead on arrival, if something doesn't work and is broken immediately, we are going to have one heck of a time taking everything back apart. And I would have to do that off camera, just because it's tiring standing here for so long, you know, talking to you guys while I'm building this. But thank you so much to everyone who is still watching and still with us. I really appreciate having your viewership, and I hope you're enjoying it. So I'm just gonna slide that motherboard cable up even a little bit more if we can. Okay, well, it's about as far as that looks like it'll go. All right, this thing is really starting to look like one beefy computer here. Once I zoom out in a minute, you'll see what I'm talking about. I'm gonna take some more of the plastic off the motherboard that I see right now, off one of the heat sinks. All right, so even though this thing does come with the power cable to convert two 6-pin power inputs into one 8-pin for your graphics card, this graphics card actually requires two 8-pin inputs. So this is really only if you're using a power supply, you're running out of inputs and you need to use 6 pins. Now our power supply, since we got such a beefy power supply, we can actually just plug in 8 pins directly into the card and that'll work for us. Alright, so we'll do our first one here. And as you can see, our power supply actually lets us do all of this with one cable. So this is going to plug into the power supply, and then this all is going to plug into our graphics card. You'll see there is a total of 16 pins there if you count all of these up on just these two plugs. So we'll plug this in here right next to our CPU power on the power supply, and we'll run that back through the back of our case. I'll grab that and pull it through. Looking very tidy at the bottom of our case there. And then we are going to bring in the power through the bottom hole here. All right, so we'll bring that back through from the other side, and we will plug this in right here. So we'll do the one further along the cable first. I think that'll be easiest. And we'll plug that into the one on the right. Okay, and that is in. I heard the click, felt it, it's in there. Now we'll do the other one. And this is another thing, my eGPU box technically wasn't supposed to support a Vega 64. The 56 was the highest it could go because it couldn't meet the power requirements of a Vega 64. Now even though I got a Vega 64 apparently on accident, and it's been working in there for the most part, every now and then it does shut off and I have to turn off the computer and turn it back on again to get it to start working again. So I'm not expecting that problem to continue happening with this. Should be much more stable with a correctly rated power supply. Alright, and that should be all the power that this thing needs. Only a measly 16 pins. That's actually a ton, this kind of thing. Alright, so I think we're good in terms of plugging that stuff in. I'm gonna stop flexing everything around there. Gonna push power back through here. Tidy up our cable management a little bit, since I know you guys are into that. Most of you guys anyway. Okay. And at this point, I am going to pause the camera. I'm going to go get that other Vega 64 or Vega 56 or whatever it is out of my eGPU box. I'll be right back once I have that, and we'll install that one as well. Okay, everyone, and that was not quite as bad as I thought it would be. I did take a couple minutes break from the talking, but I did get that other card out of my render box. I think after I had taken it apart the first time, I sort of remembered how to do it, so it was not nearly as traumatic of an experience as it was the first time, trying to figure out how I was going to fit the card in when I wasn't even sure if it was possible. Getting it out was much easier. But yeah, at this point, we are going to go ahead and put it into slot 3 here of our PCI, and we'll open these things up. I don't think, I'm just going to check the motherboard manual just to make sure. I am fairly certain it really does not matter which port we put this in or which PCI slot, but just going to check. PCIe 1 is used for 16 lane width graphics cards. PCIe 4 is used for PCI Express 16 lane width graphics cards. Okay, so it actually does matter. Because even though these are all physically X16 slots, PCIe 3.0 times 16, 2 of the slots are actually times 8 slots. Even though they're physically 16, they actually only have wiring for 8. So this card would work, but it would not work at the full capacity, not at the full speed. So I want to put this thing, they should be in 1 and 4, which actually I think was what I was going to do anyway. Okay, so we just covered up number 2, I guess. Number 3 is a times 1 physically, and then number 4 I think is the one that I was going to use, because there's 5 slots actually in here. So this thing can actually only support 3 graphics cards, I guess, which 3 is still better than the one that my laptop could do, or 2. but we want them in 1 and 4. Yes, so the second from the bottom, that is the one that I was installing it into anyway. So, my instinct was correct there with which one to put it into. I've been doing this for a while, so you pick those things up. But yeah, that is an important reason to check your motherboard manual, because if I had put it, say, into the bottom slot instead, then it would not have been running at full speed. And really, if I knew for sure that one of these was a Vega 56 and the other one was a 64, theoretically I should put the 56 on my display so that the 64 can be used for rendering while I'm using the display. But since they both show up as 64 anyway, I'm going to put the new one as my display card, and I'm going to have the one that was rendering before continue to be the 24/7 renderer. Like I said, in the future I might get one more card to pop in here, or I can always rearrange them later off video. But for now, I'm going to open these things up, remove these back panels. Okay, exact same port configuration on the back here, and the sticker on this one actually does say Vega 56, but like I said, once you actually plug it in, you start looking at it in software, every single reference acts like it's a Vega 64. So we'll see if it continues to do that in the new computer. I don't know, maybe it was something with my laptop. Unlikely, but we'll see if the 56 sees the real 64 and decides to stop pretending. All right, but we will pop in the card there. Okay, and we're in. Man, this thing looks so freaking beefy, this whole computer. I'm excited to see this thing working. Let me grab my screwdriver. Man, this is the most powerful computer that I've ever used. And AMD graphics cards, by the way, are a great choice if you're using Linux. NVIDIA graphics cards basically only work well if you're using their proprietary driver, which causes all sorts of glitches and problems with different desktop environments and things. And just games sometimes. Whereas AMD graphics cards, they actually don't have proprietary drivers anymore for the graphics cards, even as an option. What they do have is a proprietary add-on for their open source drivers, but if all you're doing is gaming, you really only need to install the open source drivers for AMD. The reason you would want proprietary add-on for AMD is if you're doing things like what I'm doing. OpenCL rendering only works with the proprietary add-on right now, although they're working on getting that implemented into the Linux kernel actually, so that you won't need that proprietary add-on anymore. They are actively working on that, which is great. That's a sign that AMD actually cares about open source and Linux support in particular, whereas NVIDIA does not at all. So I highly recommend going with AMD. And the performance really is amazing. I mean, especially for rendering and like scientific usage, which is the same libraries that I use for rendering. It's called OpenCL. Is what AMD uses instead of CUDA is what NVIDIA uses. Really great computing cards, and then they work pretty, they should work well for gaming too. I've never been able to really say for sure. Now I'll be able to at least test it to let people know. Okay, and there's the second card. Man, this entire computer, just look at it. Just look at it. It looks freaking ridiculous. I'm glad we've got the full glass panel actually for the side, because there's so much cool stuff in here. It looks really, really awesome. Okay, so I'll get another power cord and plug this one in. And I'm gonna try and plug this one into a different 12-volt rail than the first one so that we don't overload our power supply on graphics cards. It might not matter which one of these plugs I plug into, but we're gonna try just in case. And it looks like the power cord that you plug into the power supply, just FYI, if you're using the second row of connectors, like I just said I did, you do have to turn the plug upside down to get it to plug into that second row of connectors. Should be easy to figure out on your own, but thought I'd mention it there. So we will pass that one as well through the back of the case. Yeah, I freaking hate my job working Windows help desk, but at least I can afford cool stuff like this. And don't worry, I did not spend all of my money on this either. I was actually able to responsibly afford this, which is very nice. Okay, so there's that. We'll plug in, pass through our power cables underneath this card here. Oh, you know, one thing I was gonna do that I just forgot until just now was I was gonna plug in the headers at the bottom of the motherboard so that it wasn't a pain to do after I installed this card, but Looks like I forgot to do that, so we'll do the headers next, I guess, because we are getting close to the end of this build, finally, after so many, we've been recording for at least 3 hours now. So I'm going to plug the power in. Sorry, I know I'm blocking the camera right now. Plugging the power in right there. Pretty simple stuff. Whew, okay. And there we are with that.